for the next hour. Thank you all so much for joining me today. This is my second webinar ever. So can everyone join me in raising their right hand? And I know I can't see you, and some of you might be driving because you can call in for this, but raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I promise. Did you say it? Okay, good. Not to be too critical of Jen. This is her second webinar ever. And then think really good thoughts. Go, Jen, go. So welcome. Glad that you're here. So this is me, and I teach full-time at Anne Arundel Community College. I'm also wearing a new hat this year. I am the lead dreamer and doer for our Center for Faculty Development, and all of this happens at Anne Arundel Community College. I know some of you are from all over the state and maybe even out of state, and we are located right outside Annapolis, Maryland. If you are hooked up into social media, lots of good hashtags to use. You can use @AACCBiz. You can use my handle, which is Upcycled Ed. That is a blog that I have. And then the hashtag company culture is always a great one to use as well. And today we're talking about a topic that a lot of businesses and organizations are leaning into and wanting to know more about, and it's about Zappos. And so I'm excited to share my experience with them. Before we get started, though, with what I know, I really would love to take a poll, and we're going to use the chat box, which I believe if you are online will be on the left-hand side of your screen, and I believe you can type in your message there. What I'd love to know is, what do you already know about Zappos, or what is your experience with Zappos? If you could just start typing what you know or your experience, then I can read those, and that'll help sort of dictate how this webinar proceeds. So I'll be quiet for a moment while you do that. I see somebody saying it's shoes. Amazing customer service. Awesome. Keep it coming. Free shipping both ways. Shoes. Shoes. Many options. Yeah. Thanks, Laura. No titles. Yeah, Patricia, that is kind of an interesting part about Zappos. You actually create your own title. Happy employees, creative, employee focus. This is great. Keep it coming. Yeah. Awesome. Good, good, good. Any other last thoughts? What do you already know? What is your experience? All right, thanks. That is really helpful. Yes, Mario, great customer service. And by the way, just so you know, in case this is your second webinar, or maybe your first, or maybe you are a webinar addict, you can type things in that chat box anytime you want. I may not always see them, but I will try to peek there from time to time. And if there's time at the end where we can do any type of question and answering, I will certainly do that. And Ron, I'm glad you're here because I love what you just said. I don't know anything about Zappos. Perfect. All right, let's move on then from the poll. And most people know Zappos because they are a very well-known shoe company. And I saw in the chat box that a lot of you know them because you either buy shoes from them or somebody in your family does. But I also heard a few of you mention that their customer service, their employee relations stand out to you as things that you're familiar with. What you may or may not realize is Zappos sales last year were around $2 billion. So they are obviously moving a lot of product, and that their product line goes even further than just shoes. You could buy jewelry, sunglasses, and apparel, all sorts of stuff that you can get through Zappos. And if you're not familiar, Zappos is now owned by Amazon. That deal happened several years ago. And the deal was when Amazon acquired Zappos, was that Amazon would run their organization like they like to run it, and that Zappos could maintain their style of doing business and their style of culture and community. And so far, that has worked out really well. We will talk about some of the ups and downs that Zappos has been experiencing during the webinar. So you may or may not be familiar with that there is an arm of Zappos, and it's called Zappos Insights. And it's actually, I don't think you can actually get there from the Zappos.com webpage, or if you can, it's going to be a little more hidden than buying a pair of shoes. But if you Google for Zappos Insights, you will hit their webpage directly. And what I love about Zappos Insights is it explains the Zappos business model. It also allows you, if you are ever in the Las Vegas area, because that's where Zappos is now headquartered. They started in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And then as the company was growing, I think it was around about 50 employees, they decided they needed more space. They needed a little bit different community. And so they moved out to old downtown Las Vegas and took over a building there. It's actually the second building that they've taken over, but it is an old city hall that they've converted into their Zappos campus. And if you go to Zappos Insight, to their website, you can actually schedule a tour, a 1-hour tour. If you are ever in that area, they are for free. And I highly recommend it. I think everything that we talk about today, you will see come alive in that tour, and you will totally get the things that I'm going to share. The other thing that I really appreciate, and this is one of the reasons why I remain a big lover of Zappos Insights, is they maintain a blog. And the blog goes back several years, and it has lots of really juicy, helpful blog posts on company culture, on core values, and just sharing the perspective of a Zappos employee. And then one of the most exciting things Zappos Insight does is they offer professional development. So people like you and me who do not work at Zappos can sign up for one of their classes. And I think that was probably the biggest discovery, other than the blog, that I was most excited about. So that's what happened for me. And here I am at the headquarters of Zappos. Again, this is the city hall that's been converted into their current campus. And just like most organizations in the 21st century, you don't just get to walk in and, have a look around. There is security, and you got to show ID, and you do need to wear badges, and you need to be either they're taking professional development like I was, or they're on a tour, or they're as part of the work that they're doing, obviously related to shoes and apparel and sunglasses, etc. So that wall behind me, by the way, is made of all Legos. And we'll be talking a little bit about the feel of Zappos, but I'll plant a seed right now that a lot of times people either take great pride in their aesthetics or they don't. And one of the things that Zappos does to help create that culture and maintain that culture is they care greatly about the aesthetics, the delight that their employees get to experience on their campus. And I think this is just a really great example of it. Now, the reason specifically that I took professional development through Zappos is because I am a trained coach. And in fact, I'm finishing up, I've got about 2 more months of my certified coach certification right now. It is through an organization, and their coaching model is called Coactive. And you can see that right below my picture. And one of the reasons I became fascinated with Zappos is because they have an internal coaching program for all 1,500 employees, and they only use the Coactive coaching model within their coaching program. So there are hundreds of coaching models around the world that you and I can be trained in, and then we can start offering our coaching services to businesses and organizations. And what I loved about Zappos is the model that I have chosen for training is the same model that they use, and it's the only model that they use. And I just was really fascinated by that. So if you would like to take a professional development class through Zappos Insights, again, Google, get to their website. At the top, it'll say training. Click on that. And I believe right now there's about 6 trainings that they're offering, everything from a culture training, which sounds fantastic, to training specifically about their style of customer service. We'll be talking a little bit about their style of governance called Holacracy. There is a Holacracy training that's pretty new. I did not see the coach training listed recently, but I believe it will be coming back. I think maybe they are iterating on it. And the cost of those trainings are anywhere between $2,000 and $6,000, so they are not cheap. But when you're there, it does include your stay, most of your meals, and the whole Zappos experience. And you're going to see that experience, or at least through my eyes, in this presentation. All right, so when you walk in, very close to that Lego wall is this wall of neckties. And you can see somebody has taken scissors to those neckties and cut them off. And I think what this represents, besides how fun and rebellious and playful Zappos can be, but really it's a little bit deeper than that. It represents something that I don't see a lot of in most US organizations. And that's at Zappos. I really felt when I was there, and I heard it from employees, and we'll see it even throughout this presentation, that Zappos wants you to bring your whole self to work. And if your whole self wears a necktie and that's what you love and that's your style, then go for it. But a lot of people, especially men who wear neckties, they wear them because that is the norm. That's what society dictates that a man wears to work. And what Zappos is really saying as soon as you walk into their campus is we want you to be you, and we want you to bring all of you. And I love that because I think about how that relates to my work at the community college. And I'm hoping that you're thinking about how it relates to your work in your organizations. But imagine if every employee got to bring their whole self to work. Not only would our organizations get 100% of us. So for example, I'm a mom. It'd be lovely to bring my mom hat to work and sometimes talk about things from that parenting perspective. Or I love the outdoors. I love all things the state of Colorado. It would be lovely to feel like that perspective was welcomed at work. And the good news is I have landed at a great place at Anne Arundel Community College. And so in many ways, I can bring all that to work, and I'm bold enough to bring it all to work. But I have to tell you, especially because I've been doing a lot of one-on-one coaching, most organizations don't encourage their staff, their employees, to bring their whole self. So one of the things that Zappos does to help Zapponians bring their whole selves to work is they have a concierge program. And I think this is fantastic. And they have about 2 people each day who run the concierge service. And basically, when you come to work in the morning, if there is something that concierge can help you with, then so be it. For example, maybe my car needs an oil change. So I go check in at the concierge desk. I give them my car keys. I've parked my car in the parking garage in a special spot because while I'm at work that day, concierge is going to make sure that my car gets to the garage so it gets an oil change and gets brought back. Concierge can also help me with banking, dropping things off, getting my dry cleaning, picking up dry cleaning. A lot of the small nuances that take up time when we're not at work. And the message here with the concierge is that if we want you to bring your whole self to work, then the flip side is also true. When you go home, we want your whole self going home too. And that doesn't mean taking everything from work with you. It means if you're a parent that you get to put on that parenting hat and drive your kid to softball practice. Or maybe you're an ultra marathoner and after work, it's your best time to train. And one of the things I just thought was so cool about the concierge piece is that it enables people to that when their workday is done, not spend hours doing the minutia that we all experience in life, but instead you get to go live life and enjoy it. So I thought that was a really, really cool piece. Also, it was all over campus, starting with the Lego wall, even to the necktie wall, which I found really inspiring. But there's hardly an area in Zappos that isn't aesthetically pleasing. And this is just a random copy machine. I was taking a tour of the whole campus and there was a chalkboard. Believe it or not, that is chalk. And if you're into rap music, then you know Notorious B.I.G. But what I loved about this is this was just one way that they beautified their campus. There were murals, there was art, there were inspiring spaces just about everywhere. And one of the things I want to also share is that every employee except for the call center employees, if I understood it correctly, and I'm going to show you the call center coming up, are given a laptop. And the idea is that there's so many possibilities when we leave our offices and cross-pollinate with people from other departments or who have other positions or roles in an organization. So not only are the spaces inspiring, but they're also really flexible to how people want to work. And of course, if you need quiet, if you need, space and solitude, there are those spaces as well. Not every space is filled up with artwork or filled up with people or filled up with conversation. There's lots of little nooks and crannies for people to think and to be productive. This, I know we have a lot of people on this webinar who work in HR. This is the HR department at Zappos. And I've been told that they sometimes will have interviews in that ball pit, which I think is hysterical. One of the things that I noticed is all throughout Zappos, nobody has a private office. So even Tony Shea, who is their CEO, I'll be sharing a photo of him later on. He just has a cubicle or a desk as part of the office space. There's no walls, there's no doors that close. And as I mentioned back on the last slide, there's so much flexibility on campus that if you did need a quiet space, it's no big deal. You can grab your laptop and go sit in the cafe, or grab your laptop and go sit outside. They have this lovely sort of outdoor deck area, or grab your laptop and go sit in one of the quiet areas. So there's lots of spaces to collaborate and lots of spaces to be by yourself. And they're very thematic. Like HR apparently chose It's a Jungle out there. So you can see this sort of jungle motif. But other spaces, one space I loved, I was born in the 70s, and one space was all toys from the 70s and 80s. So it felt like I was going back to my childhood room. Another space was very Zen-like, and I thought, God, what a great space when you're tired or you just need a quiet place to work. The other thing that I want to point out is that because this is an old city hall building, right? So it wasn't, I don't think, designed when it was built, decades ago to be this very collaborative place. So when Zappos moved in, they definitely tore down a lot of walls so that the spaces would be more open and collaborative. But they also made sort of communal areas so that employees could, break bread together. They could have a cup of coffee together. So at Zappos, there is a coffee shop. And everything is $3 or less there. There is the Z Cafe, which you can grab lunch at, and everything I believe is freshly made, homemade. I think the amounts, the costs are $7 or less. And then at the end of each major hallway, I also noticed like a communal kitchen, a pretty decent size, actually bigger than I think most home kitchens. And it seemed to be stocked with, heat and eat oatmeals and fruit and water and sort of the essentials to sort of take the craving off that you might have that day, but not enough to sustain you your entire day there. So just a place for people to meet and to be with each other. Now, before we take a break of me talking, because I'm obviously doing a lot of talking in this webinar, and by the way, it is so strange not to see you all in person. I wish I had little icons so I could see all your smiling faces. Holacracy, it's a weird word, right? Such a strange word. I knew nothing about holacracy when I went to Zappos, and so I'm going to try to give you what I understand. I've read a lot about holacracy and self-organizing organizations after I left. So I've been sort of studying that for almost the last year, and I'm really fascinated by it. So what I'd like you to think about is in most organizations, I will use my community college as a great example. It is set up like a hierarchy. We have our president, we have our vice presidents, we sometimes have associate vice presidents, we have our deans, we have our directors, we have our chairs, we have our faculty. That's where I fit in, by the way, and our staff is also in that line. So most organizations are set up in that manner. But imagine taking that pyramid and laying it down on its side. So you're like flipping it on its side. That's holacracy. And that's where those circles in this graphic come in. So what Zappos noticed is when they started in San Francisco, they were very innovative, they were cutting edge, and there was a lot of really cool momentum for the company. Then they moved out to Las Vegas. They got bigger and bigger. They went from 50 employees. They're now up to 1,500 employees. Oh, and by the way, let me just mention that the shoes are not shipped or sold from, well, they are sold. We'll get to the call center in a minute, but they're not shipped from the Las Vegas location. All the shoes come out of a warehouse out of Kentucky, and they strategically chose that area because you can get to the East Coast quickly and the West Coast quickly. It is right by a UPS hub, right by a major airport in Kentucky. And so if you're ever wondering why you get your things so fast and you didn't pay overnight shipping, that's why. It is coming from Kentucky. And sometimes, depending on the time you order, it can make it on the truck by 8 p.m. that night, make it by ground or to a flight, and be to you the next day by 10 in the morning. So with all that being said, as their company grew on all campuses, both the Kentucky, where it's more of a warehouse, but certainly the one in Las Vegas, what Tony Hsieh, the CEO, started to notice is they were becoming less innovative. And I understand how this would happen. I mean, think about the organizations that you belong to or you are familiar with. The bigger you get, the more cooks in the kitchen, the more moving parts, the more variables. In many ways, you need a whole lot of structure to kind of keep that ship moving forward. And what Holacracy does is it takes that hierarchical model and it says, instead of the leaders being at the top and we sort of wind our way down to the staff and the crew, what if everybody was a leader? What if we don't have any true leaders in the company, but everybody is given a voice? Now, I know that sounds absolutely crazy. I recently shared a presentation like this with my college, and I could see people's jaw drop. Like, what do you mean I wouldn't have a boss? And that is very much what Holacracy is like. It is like you were hired because you brought a skill to this company, and by golly, now we want you to use your skill and your voice and your expertise to get the job done. And I think that's what is so cool about Holacracy is it gives everybody at every single level an opportunity to voice what their ideas are, where they think a project needs to go, how to get that project from point A to B. Excuse me. And that's very different. And again, I'll use my college as an example. I may have an idea that I think is fantastic, and I have to, at my college, check in with my chair, who checks in with my director, who checks in with my dean, who checks in with the associate vice president, who checks in with the vice president, who checks in with the president. Do you see how it might stop innovation? Okay, there's so many checks that take place that it's a little bit tricky sometimes to have that voice that's at the bottom of the pyramid heard. So in Holacracy, the pyramid doesn't exist anymore, but instead it's replaced by circles. And I like to think of a circle like a team or like a tribe. It is a group of people who come together for a purpose. So let's imagine that I was hired to be a graphic designer at Zappos, and they have a whole team of graphic designers because they have an app and they have an online presence, and every other piece of their company obviously needs graphic design. So if I'm hired to be a graphic designer, I will be in the graphic design department, and we'll probably have a circle related to just graphic design. But now let's imagine somebody else who works for Zappos is running an event, and that event needs graphics. They're going to invite somebody who's a graphic designer to join that circle, that team, so that we can create this event, create the graphics that are related to it. Along with that, we might want, I don't know, somebody who's an environmental expert. Maybe we're going to be in an area where we're concerned that the environment could get trampled on during this big event with thousands of people. So again, in that circle, I'm going to invite people who have an expertise that they can bring to the task at hand. So from what I understand right now, there are about 500 different circles that exist at Zappos, and the majority of them are professionally infused, meaning that they have a purpose. There are some circles, though, that are there because of common interests. For example, if a group of us wanted to get together and create a yoga circle, we could do that. By the way, there is a yoga studio at the Zappos campus. We could do that. So you come together for a purpose and a task. You can also come together as a circle that has an interest, and yoga would be a great example. I've got one last thing to share with you about the circles, actually two. It's a very weird concept, right? I don't know many businesses that practice Holacracy and have done it well. Zappos has been trying it on for about 3 years now. So about a year ago, Tony Hsieh, the CEO, said, you're either on the Zappos Holacracy bus or you're off. And we're trying to move forward with this new style of governance. It is weird. We're going to stumble and fall. Things are not going to be pretty for a while until we get the structure behind Holacracy. So if you're on the bus, great. Let's keep moving forward. But if you're going to hold us up, if this is not something you believe, then a year ago, Tony Hsieh said, we will give you a 3-month severance package to leave Zappos. Okay. And I love that piece. I love that you're either on the bus or you're off the bus. And if you're off the bus, no harm done, no judgment. Take this money and go do something else. The other thing is, if you had been at Zappos longer than 3 years, you actually got $1,000 for each year that you had worked at Zappos. So for example, I met a woman who had been there 8 years, and she said, I'm leaving not because I don't believe in holacracy or Zappos. I'm leaving because I have some dreams to do some other things business-wise. And I'm about to get 8 months worth of my salary and benefits, I should mention, to go get that done. So what they didn't expect at Zappos is that 18% of their workforce chose the severance package, whether it was the 3-month or more. But what I think is most admirable about Zappos is that, one, they were brave enough to say you're on the bus or off the bus. Second, they provided an easy, safe out for people so that people could get their legs under them. And then 3, they've also provided a lot of training on what it means to be a holacratic government, what is your role in that government, and what are the structures? Because a lot of people think holacracy is like, I don't know, Lord of the Flies, and everyone's kind of out for themselves. But it actually, if you read about it, has a ton of structure and process behind it. All right, I am doing a whole lot of talking, which I guess you expect in a webinar, but let's take a short break. So at the top of your screen, I believe there's a little button that says interact. And this is why holacracy works. It works because employees bring an open mind, flexibility, their interests, their skills, and their whole self to work. I'm curious, do you bring all of those attributes to your workplace? So I believe if you go up, there's an interact button and you can click, yes, I bring all of these, or no, I don't. I know we might have a few people who are retired or not working right now. If you could choose, are you bringing that to your life right now? I'll be quiet for a moment while you guys vote. Did everybody get a chance to vote? One of my colleagues, Patty, is helping me behind the scenes. She's actually in a whole nother state. Patty, is there a way to share that vote? I'm afraid to click anything for fear that I might knock myself out of the webinar.
Yeah, to maintain attendee anonymity, if you will, their anonymous attendance, what we want to do is just kind of leave that only viewable to you.
Okay. Does it happen to tally up so that we know?
It looks like about half and half, about half thumbs up and half thumbs down.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks. Thanks, Patty, for your help. All right. And to all of you who are on the webinar, I'm just planting a seed. You know, I mentioned that my background is in coaching, and it would be a really interesting piece to start noticing, when are you bringing your open mind, your flexibility, your interests, your skills, or your whole self, or just choosing one piece of that, and just be aware of when do you bring it and when do you leave it at home or leave it behind. So I mentioned the call center, and a lot of people are familiar with call centers. This is the Zappos call center, and let me tell you, it looks like a party. When you go to Las Vegas and take the tour, because I have a feeling a lot of people will now be making tour reservations, this is what you will see. It is an open area. There's always a team on the phones 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, except for 4 times a year, they have what's called an all-hands meeting. That means if you are an employee of Zappos in the Las Vegas area, the meeting is required that you attend. And I was there for the all-hands meeting, and it was like a meeting like I've never seen before, like super fun, really engaging, really energetic. We had several keynotes that day. They shared their sales figures for the quarter. And I was told that if you had tried to call and order shoes during the all hands meeting and happy hour, big happy hour. So it took about probably 5 to 6 hours between the all hands meeting and the happy hour, that the entire call center was closed, and you would have heard an automated message that said, hey, we're at our all hands company meeting. We'll be back later to answer your call. In the meantime, feel free to shop online. Because only about 10% of Zappos business is through the call center. Most people probably do what you do when you order from Zappos, and that is to simply look online, click, and buy. One thing that I found fascinating about the call center, besides that it looks like a party is going on at every given moment. And by the way, people are on the phone talking and they're serious and they're doing their work. So I say it looks like a party, but you don't sell $2 billion in merchandise without being a highly productive workforce. So a couple of things that I thought were really fascinating. Every single employee, from Tony Hsieh, the CEO, down to, I can't even think what down to would be, because in a holocratic environment, nobody is a down to. Every single employee is trained to work in the call center. So this is how it works. When you are hired at Zappos, besides getting to sit in the ball pit potentially for an interview, it's a pretty lengthy interview process. You meet with all sorts of people. They are sizing up your skills and experience. You could look online and see what their job postings are, but it's not like a quick, you meet with one person and you get the job kind of interview piece. It's a pretty lengthy interview process. Then once you are offered a position, there is a 5-week onboarding process. 2 of the 5 weeks are spent learning how to work in the call center. Okay. And the reason being is Zappos is inundated with sales in the month of December, and in the month of January, they are inundated with returns and exchanges. Okay. So they really need all hands on deck. And instead of having seasonal employees, what they require is that during the months of December and January, no matter what your job or role is, you could be the CFO of Zappos, you could be the graphic designer of Zappos, you could work in the cafe at Zappos. You are also going to spend 10 hours of your work week in the call center. So that means every employee, including Tony Hsieh, the CEO, I would love to call and get him on the phone. I'd keep him on the phone for hours talking. Has to work in the call center, and thus they have to have skills to work in the call center. So I thought that was really neat. The other piece that I thought was neat is, and I have it, I believe, on the next slide, is the number one metric that is used in the call center is not how many pairs of shoes did you sell that day, but instead, with every single person that you've interacted with on the phone, did you create a PEC? A personal emotional connection. So you can try this when we get off the webinar today. You can just call Zappos and act like you're buying some shoes, or maybe you're going to, and see what that conversation is like. So for example, if I were a customer and I were to call Zappos, I might say, hey, I'm looking for a black pair of flats. And they might say, oh, where are you going in your new flats? And I might say, oh, I'm headed to a job interview and I think those flats will be really cool with my suit. And then they might say, oh, where are you applying? Have you worked there before? So the whole idea, the whole metric, the whole vibe is about connecting. And I love that. First, I'm an educator, so I'm all about connecting, and I'm a parent, and I'm a coach. And I didn't get to see your names who were in this webinar, but I did get to see your organizations, and I did get to see your titles. And I mean, you guys are a roster of people who connect. And so having a PEC, that personal emotional connection, is a really important piece of the business of Zappos, but I also think it's a really important piece of the business that all of you are in. So let's use the chat box over to the left. So now you have to do some typing if you happen to be on a computer and can type. I know some of you are on the phone, in 5 to 7 words. So kind of bottom line it. How do you create a PEC with your customers or clients? And if you're not in a workplace right now, you can think about, how do you create a PEC with your neighbors, with your friends and family? So I'll give you a minute and I'll start reading some of those in the chat box. Type away, I'm reading.
Jen, this is Sonia. I'm stepping in for Patty.
Hi, Sonia.
Hi. There is a question about if there's a talk time in the call center as a metric, and how it balances out with the PEC, if
Awesome.
at all.
Yes, I'll address that in 1 second. Thanks for pointing that out. Oh, Brad, I love what you said about identifying somebody's struggle and then articulating the frustration. And coaching, we say name it to tame it. And that's what I'm hearing there is like naming that struggle. And then through that naming, you have a better opportunity to tame it. Oh, yeah. Sue, yes. Trust, empathy, active listening, creative brainstorming. Those are all beautiful ways to create a PEC. So feel free to add more in the chat box of what you do to create a PEC with your customers or clients. Lori had a question about how do you balance a PEC with talk times and shoe selling, etc. And the cool thing about Zappos is they are definitely aware of their wait times on the phone. They try to keep it really short. And also the amount of times their employees are on the phone, but that is not the lead metric for which to measure success. Because ultimately what they know is the more PECs they have, the more shoes they're going to sell, the more people like me and you want to learn about Zappos. So one thing that you could do, Lori, is call Zappos later on today and say, hey, I was just like hearing about your personal emotional connections. How do you guys, I mean, you could talk to the Zappos person on the phone. How do you balance that with your time on the phone call? From what I understand, the longest phone call at Zappos, I was told, was 10 hours. Can you imagine a customer and a Zapponian hit it off on the phone, and for 10 hours they kept the conversation going. I heard another example of somebody from Zappos sending a customer who was on the phone. They had their address up and the person was ordering shoes, and the conversation got going, that the Zapponian sent the customer pizza. They were still on the phone when the pizza arrived. And then I also heard it was very touching example of a PEC. The woman who was giving me the tour had come from the call center. That was her role. By the way, Zappos does a lovely job of promoting from within. So if there's a job you want and you start acquiring skills towards that job, they have a lovely way of helping you get to wherever you want to go. But what she said is she was talking to a woman on the phone. The woman called and said, I need a pair of black, fancy shoes. And the Zapponian employee said, oh, great, where are you going? Thinking it was this really upbeat occasion. And the woman said, oh, my husband was in the military and was deployed, and he passed away overseas, and it's his funeral. And of course, that's not, somebody's prom or homecoming. And she said that when she got off the phone, besides overnighting the shoes to the woman for free, and every person who works in the call center, by the way, has this benefit. She sent the woman a bouquet of flowers from Zappos saying, we know we can't take, obviously, this pain away, or something like that, but please know that we're thinking of you. The woman had also on that call bought a pair of shoes for her son. And because probably the son wouldn't appreciate a bouquet of flowers, they ordered a toy. She ordered a toy, the Zappos employee, to send to the son to just, bring some joy into such a sad occasion. So I think the whole idea of the PEC is just a lovely way to be. And right now, quite frankly, I think our society could use a little bit more PECing. Now, I'm just going to take one more look over in the chat box before we move on. This is great. Yeah, I love it. I think it was Mark had, a really great way. You just ask a really important question. How's business? How are you? What's important? What's next? What's possible? I mean, all of those curious questions show that you care about your customers and your clients, and you care about each other. So I've mentioned Tony Hsieh's name a few times. He is the guy on the right. He is in his early 40s. And I was there for about 2.5 days, and this is no exaggeration. He wore that same exact outfit both days. And I know because I was appreciating those holy jeans and his very faded Zappos t-shirt. And then the next day he was wearing those holy jeans and his very faded Zappos t-shirt. And if you don't know a lot about Tony Hsieh, in the role of a holacratic government, there is no CEO, so to speak. So about a year ago, when he said you're either on the bus or off the bus as far as Zappos and holacracy goes, he said, as a CEO, this is really my last hurrah, because in a holacratic government, there is no CEO. Now, the rest of the world needs titles, okay? And I think somebody mentioned at the very beginning that that's one thing that they knew about Zappos, is that there is no internal titles. So for example, the girl that was giving me a tour, she was new to the department, the Zappos Insight department that does the tour. You know, the rest of the world would have called her, you know, a Zappos Insight employee or a tour guide for Zappos. But on her tag, it said FNG, and that stands for freaking new girl. And I said to her, what? And she said, yeah, Zappos, we just make up our own titles, because in a holacratic structured organization, the title doesn't matter. What matters is the expertise and skills you bring to a process, a task, or a responsibility. So the same thing for Tony Hsieh. When he is on the Zappos campus, he is part of those 500 circles, obviously not all of them. But when he's off the Zappos campus, the rest of the world knows him as the CEO of Zappos, okay? The other thing that I love is I have an addiction to all things RV and trailer, and he lives in an Airstream in the middle of old downtown Las Vegas and has 2 alpacas as pets. So he's just a really eclectic soul. The woman to his left who's wearing her baseball hat backwards, her name is Augusta, and she was the lead life coach for Zappos, except for when I was there, she had just announced that she was taking the severance package, and she took it for the reason I shared with you earlier. She said, it's not that I don't love Zappos, I don't love holacracy, and I love coaching at Zappos. She said, I'm taking this because I want to start my own coaching business, and I also want to start an event business, and 8 months of salary provides the freedom to do that. All right, a couple more things, and then we will wrap up. And if we have time, we'll do some Q&A. But like many really great organizations, Zappos is about being part of the community. It's not just about selling shoes, as I think we've proven. It is about that PEC, and part of that PEC extends to the community. So they have done a lot to help revitalize old downtown Las Vegas. If you've been to that area, then you may have gone to this. It is this awesome park. It's called Container Park, and it's all old shipping containers that have been strategically aligned, painted, and then transformed into shops and restaurants. Here is another shot from Container Park. It really is a destination now. And if you've been to old downtown Las Vegas, you know that area has definitely been up and coming over the last few years. There is still more to do there, and Zappos is committed to being a part of that community. And I think that's a really lovely example. As I mentioned earlier, Zappos is a huge company. They do all of what we said, okay? They focus on personal connections, and they still make $2 billion in sales, or they still have that sales number. Somebody just today told me that their sales numbers are flat. And even if they were flat, my gosh, at $2 billion a year, you do catch your breath. Sounds good to me. And what I want you to be thinking, and we'll use the polling box off to the side, the chat box, is now that you've heard a little bit more from me, obviously, but also what you already knew about Zappos, what do you think is most important to them? Okay, what do you think is most important to Zappos? Can you list your ideas in the chat box? Brad, you're like right in there. You're like, people. Yes, totally. What else? I will drink water while I watch. Relationships. Yes, Patricia. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Empowerment, satisfaction, work-life balance. Yes. Beautiful. Anything else y'all want to add? One more sip of water for me. All right. So your company or organization, or hopefully you personally, may have identified some values, core values. Zappos is all about their core values. There are 10 of them. You can see them right here. In their blog, they talk about a lot of their values and even how they got to their values. They also do professional development on building a culture, and part of that is an organization identifying their values. I'll just point out a few, like number 3, create fun in a little weirdness. And I think you could see through the pictures at Zappos, it's not an ordinary place. There is so much fun happening. If you want it to happen, if you want to be a part of it, there's also quiet spaces, as I mentioned too. I love number 5, pursue growth and learning. Zappos really does believe its employees will not stay there forever, and that each employee has dreams of what they want to do to have a fulfilled life. And part of being a Zapponian is to keep pursuing, keep growing and learning, whatever it is that you want to do. If it fits the company and what the company needs are great. But if it doesn't, if it's something else you want to do, there's no judgment for you staying at Zappos, soaking in all the awesomeness, and of course you bringing your awesomeness too, and then going off to greener pastures. I also love number 10, to be humble. And that's one thing I really noticed about Tony Hsieh, especially, is he has every right to brag. When he was in his 20s, he sold his first company for $245 million to Microsoft. This is a high achieving guy, a Harvard graduate, but you would never know it. Again, living in an Airstream, wearing his ratty jeans a couple of days in a row, and just really down to earth, really, really down to earth. Now, these core values are really important. When you are hired, this list is part of that hiring process. And that way, especially for you folks who are HR minded on the webinar today, you are getting people who really believe in what your company stands for. It is also the reason you get fired from Zappos, okay? So one of those 500 circles that we talked about does have the ability to fire employees. It is not a quick process like most organizations, but part of that is when you are not upholding and living these values, then you're really going against what Zappos is about. So they hire by these values, they fire by these values, they live by these values. And on the back of everybody's name badge are these 10 values. And they know them. That onboarding process that I spoke about for 5 weeks, a lot of that onboarding process is about what is the culture at Zappos and how do we live out these values in our work every single day. The one thing I didn't mention about the onboarding process is if at the end of that 5-week onboarding, so 2 weeks are reserved for learning how to work the call center and actually starting to work the call center, and then 3 weeks are reserved for learning about Zappos in general, but also things that are very specific to the job that you were hired for. But if at the end of those 5 weeks, if you think, oh, this place is too weird and fun for me, or this place, I don't know, number 7 says build a positive team and family spirit. This is too collaborative of an environment for me. Then Zappos will offer $2,000 for you to leave Zappos and not continue on with employment there. They said very few people have taken that, but a few people have. And what I love about this is this is what you sign up for to work at Zappos. And if you don't believe in these core values, then either don't interview, don't take the job, or certainly don't stay with us. Now, before I went to Zappos, I get this like cryptic email from them, and it says, we're FedExing you a book. You need to read it before you arrive. And this is the book. I don't know if you read this book. If you have, in the chat box, just, say, I've read it. It is, I think, a fantastic book. Let me start with that. It is a fable or a parable. And a lot of times people don't like that because it's not a true story. But let me just tell you, this is exactly how Zappos runs their company. They really believe that they are dream managers, okay, for their employees and their colleagues. I mean, besides committing to an internal life coaching benefit and department, which is fantastic, They are also believe that this is how companies should run. We should be dream managers for each other. So at my college, we now have about 10 copies of this book that you can check out. So if you're in Anne Arundel County and you want to come check it out, just bring, your driver's license. Our college library is open to everyone. But if not, I highly recommend this book. I've been recommending it to business owners. I've recommended it to school districts. My husband's an engineer at the Department of Defense. He read it recently. He's not a huge reader. He read it in 2 nights. That's how fast it is. And when he was done, he said, wow. And guess what? That wow means that the conversation changes when we start seeing ourselves as dream managers for others. If you are a parent on this call, you need to read Dream Manager too, because we are dream managers for our kids. It is a highly powerful book. All right, let's do one last poll before we say our goodbyes. Let's use the chat box again. Okay, I'm an educator and I always want to know, you've been here for the entire webinar. What can you apply from this webinar to your company, to your business, or just to your life? I'd love to hear some of your ideas. I'll drink water while I read the chat box. Keep them coming. Ron, thank you for pointing out the PEC. It's a great, you can bring the PEC to every part of your life. Talk about your whole self. Yeah, Stephanie, you're right on. This is not just about PEC with customers. Imagine having PECs with employees. Ooh, it's so Zappos, so Zapponian. Yes, yes. Oh, Sue, you hit the nail on the head. Passion, people, all hands on deck. Yeah, it really is like it takes a village. Team means everyone. Oh, these are so good. Love reading this. Yeah, Mark, you point out something really important is most organizations actually have a mission statement, a value statement, even a vision, and they're not in terms that people can actually hear and digest. And so it's really important to make sure that your colleagues really understand, what does your company stand for? And it's written in language like Zappos uses that I can understand and digest. Great. Yeah, Christopher, you point out that there's opportunities for all personality types. I have to say, one of the things that struck me was how diverse, both in age, gender, I'll probably say socioeconomic status. I mean, I'm really, I don't know what people were making or not making there. But I could tell, I was talking to the woman who was a single mom and talking to somebody who works in the couture department. She's a shoe buyer there, and she had on like this fabulous outfit. I mean, there's people who they just come from every like walk of life, and they're all there living those same values. It really was quite fantastic. Pardon, let me get a drink of water real fast. All right, we are winding down. A couple things before we say our webinar goodbyes. First off, if you have not read Delivering Happiness, it was written by Tony Hsieh. It talks a lot about how Zappos came to be. He is not the original founder of Zappos. So if you want to hear how it really started off and why it is named Zappos, then definitely check out Delivering Happiness. The other thing that I want to mention is there's another book that I love. And when I saw who wrote the foreword, I was even more excited because Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos, wrote the foreword. It is the book Tribal Leadership. I love that book. It makes me think that good organizations have read that book too. It goes through 5 different levels of tribes. I think it is quite fascinating. The other thing is, before we officially say our goodbyes, this is how you can find me in case we need to find each other again. I also have a blog, and I'm also a teacher, so I've got some teaching things that I've been creating with a colleague that are bringing me great joy and honoring my values. And last but not least, before we maybe can take 1 or 2 questions, I just want to say for folks who need to jump off immediately, thank you so much. If you're not familiar with our corporate training at AACC, I think Sonia, who's on this call, Sonia, are you there? Are you going to follow up with people?
Yes, so everyone will receive a survey with your time that you spend here just to give us some feedback. This is one of the outreach components that our office does for the local community, and we want to make sure that we're providing you the most benefit for your time and giving back to you. So this is one of those ways that we can do that. And so if you have ideas or thoughts for other webinars and or events, that's how we collect it as well as get feedback. Jen, I want to thank you for your time today, your insight, and sharing your experience at Zappos. It looks like we have a question.
Yes. So one of the questions I see is, can we view the webinar another time? Sonia, will you be sending out a link to that?
Yes, so at our website, you see it on screen if you're only logged in by phone. The website is www.ctgAACC, all one word, ctgAACC.com. There at the far right of the screen, you'll see webinars, other things. All of our webinars that we offer are all recorded, and that will be up within a few days.
Yeah. And I just want to say, because I teach in the education department, and I don't interface a whole lot with corporate training, but these folks are rock stars. Sonia, I'm going to make you blush behind your screen. Sonia and her team, they're very Zapponian in the way they see the world. They could help your organization mine for values if you don't already have them. I'm willing to help out there too if you need me. They can just, sort of help you get those PECs going. We have about 1 minute left. Is there a question you want answered, or are you feeling pretty content right now and ready to go get on with your day and infuse a little Zappos? Oh, Lori, you're so sweet. She said AACC rock stars. Thanks, Jen. You're so welcome.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. If you have other questions, please feel free to send them either to ctg@aacc.edu or directly to Jen, and we'll get back to you. Everyone will receive the follow-up survey, and that will also the link to the recorded webinar once that's uploaded. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you so much, Jen, for your time today and your insights, and we look forward to reconnecting with everyone really soon.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much.